Hi, I'm Mandeep Singh, CEO and founder of Mandeeps.com and Vanjaro. Thank you so much for joining me in this series of preview videos of Vanjaro. So let's get started. It's easy to create a web page with Vanjaro's drag and drop editor. It's even easier to work with images. Quickly search through millions of royalty-free images. Let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to go ahead and change this image, and let's go to this tab here called Search Online and look for an office image. So there's a bunch of images that just got returned from the web, and these are all royalty free, and I can go ahead and choose one. I'm going to go ahead and choose this one on the first right now. And what's happening behind the scenes is the image actually got downloaded and saved on our site. Vanjaro automatically downloads the highest resolution image it finds and saves it on your site. Let's go ahead and publish this page and close through. In this video, we're going to talk about how to optimize images for web to improve performance. I mean, it's great that I can quickly go on and find images and download them, but it certainly doesn't help if there's the highest resolution image on the file, especially if it's a mobile device. So let's talk about performance and images. The first thing usually when you are working on a web page is you figure out what is the correct or appropriate file format for that image. Do you want to use a JPEG, a PNG, a GIF, or an SVG. JPEGs are great for photographs or bitmaps, and PNG is great if you want transparency, and GIFs are good for animations, and SVG is obviously the clear winner if you got a vector-based graphics. So what about the next gen formats? Things like JPEG 2000, JPEG XR, or WebP. Well, let me go ahead and switch over to one of our blog posts right here, and let's take a look at this. So WebP has both lossy and lossless compression, so it is the optimal choice in terms of the file size. It's usually on average about 30% smaller footprint in terms of file size, so that translates to 30% improvement in performance right away. So basically, we want to save our images in WebP. The problem with WebP is not every browser supports it. It has over 80% support already, but still, you got to take care of the other 20%. So then you have to worry about a fallback. So you got to have a PNG or JPEG of your image and a WebP, and then figure out on runtime if the browser supports WebP and then serves WebP. Otherwise, you serve them a JPEG or PNG. All right, let's talk about the next thing. Well, you got to resize your images to scale. Let me explain. See, the image we have down here is roughly 500 pixels wide on our display and our viewport, but the file that we actually downloaded was 1920 pixel wide, full high definition. Well, that's not good. It gets further complicated. What if I was on a mobile device? If I'm on an iPhone 6, 7, 8, then that image now is displaying at under 375 pixels. So it really doesn't make sense for me to go ahead and have a 1920 pixel wide image to serve for mobile. And similarly, if I am on an iPad, then I am at 768 pixels wide. But notice, even though the viewport is 768 pixels wide, that image is probably shown at 350 pixels or something along those lines. So bottom line is that image could be shown at different width depending on which device and viewport you're looking at. So ultimately, one size does not fit all. Well, let's make things more complex. Let's go back to the blog and let's talk about device pixel ratio. Well, with iPhones, we heard about Retina Display, which is a brand name used by Apple, basically to indicate that the iPhones have a higher pixel density than the actual physical resolution. Which really means that if you are trying to show a 350 pixel wide image on an iPhone that has a DPR of 2 or twice as much pixel density, then you really need to show a 700 pixel image. So it is crisp and clean for an iPhone. Wow, talk about more confusion. Well, there are iPhones that have a DPR of 3 and there are devices that have a DPR even of more. So that is utter complexity in terms of figuring out how many different versions of images you need to have and how do you serve them. So bottom line is not that you need to have different file formats like WebP and PNG and JPEG, you also need to have different sizes. You need to have your images in 1920 pixel, you need to have in 768, maybe other smaller versions as well. So that's one. And then there's another concept called lazy loading, right? You only show your images once they're actually displayed on the page. You really don't want to show images that are buried underneath, below the fold, until a user actually scrolls down to take a look at it. All right, enough of this blog and theory. Let's go back and take a look, and let's see what Vanjaro does for us. Well, in a nutshell, Vanjaro did all of this for us by me just double clicking on an image and saving it. It's time to take a look what it did behind the scene. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and inspect this image right here, and let's take a look. So one of the first things we notice is that this image is actually using a picture tag versus just a plain old image tag. And that's because it has two different sources for images. The first one is in WebP and second one is a fallback. So any browser that does support WebP will use WebP versions of the image, and any browser that does not support WebP will use the other version. Wait, so are we saying Vanjaro created multiple versions behind the scenes? Sure it did. Let's take a look. So let me move this into some icons so we can refer to the image we were talking about. So that's the image right there that we were working with, is 1245776 that Vanjaro downloaded from Pixabay automatically for us. Now, if you notice, Vanjaro created a folder called .versions, and there it's maintaining the different versions of this image for us, all done automatically. Now there is a WebP version. Actually, there's 4 different versions, WebP versions of that file, and there's 4 different JPEG versions of that file as well. So if you notice, there's a file in 360 pixels wide, there's a file in 720 pixels wide, 1280 and 920. That is cool. Vanjaro went ahead and created 8 different versions of that image to automatically serve the best version possible based on the device that's actually viewing the page. All right, so now that we know we have 8 different versions to work with, let's look at the magic. So we already looked at the fact that there's 2 different sources. There's WebP, and then there's the fallbacks. And then there's the default image tag too, which points to the file that we uploaded. Now notice that it has the loading equals lazy tag, which basically takes care of the lazy loading for us. So that's super cool and easy. But let's look at the more interesting stuff. So if we examine this source tag, we see that I have an image right here, which is a 1920 pixels wide image that I'm basically instructing that if a viewport is 1920, basically I'm instructing that that image right there is 1920 pixels wide. The next image I have is 1280 pixels wide. The next one is 720, and the last one is 360 pixels wide. We're basically letting the browser decide which is the correct image to show to this user. Now this is all cool. The browser only knows the device viewport. How big is the viewport of the device that's viewing the page? It has no idea about your image until it actually loads it, and that is too late. So basically here we're letting the browser know that if there is a device that is coming on 1920 pixels wide, then this image that you're looking at is about 28% of that viewport. Wow, how did we come up with this number? And then we actually came up with that number for each different breakpoint for your media queries. So we can figure out if somebody's on a mobile or a tablet and so forth. Now this is where Vanjaro shines. I'm gonna go ahead and close this and open this again. And I'm gonna simply go ahead and click on the publish button. Notice the page goes dark for a second and it says optimizing images. And that's where all the magic happens. So the reason we actually darken the page is because behind the scenes, Vanjaro actually goes ahead and iterates through every breakpoint, not just mobile and tablet, but 5-6 different breakpoints, whether you're in iPad, landscape, portrait, and so forth. Now notice if I'm in a desktop, the image is shown about 500 pixels or something. When I go on a tablet, the same image is now it's about 300 some pixels. When I go to mobile, it's also 300 pixels. So every breakpoint, whether it's an iPad, ultra high resolution desktop, will have this image showing in different resolutions. So All right, that's how we figure out what those percentages or the numbers are. And when you hit publish, it computes all that for each page for each image on the page and updates that dynamically. So that's awesome. But what does this all mean? All right, let's go ahead and take a look at it. I'm gonna go ahead and inspect this image, and when I look at it, I now see that this image is actually 538 pixels wide. And the intrinsic, or the image that actually got loaded, was not the 1920 pixel wide image that was actually downloaded. Instead, the 720 pixels wide version. So cool, it figured all that on its own. So that is awesome. Now, if I go ahead and take a look at the same page, and let's say an iPhone 6, 7, or 8, I'm gonna go ahead and refresh this here and inspect it, I will see that the image is now shown at 330 pixels. So I would have assumed that the browser would actually show a 360 pixel image right here for a 330 pixel size. But it turns out iPhone 6, 7, and 8 is a Retina display, has 2 times the device pixel density, and thus it actually is looking for an image that is 660 pixel wide, not 330, and therefore it chose to show a 320 pixel wide image. So that is super cool. Now let's go ahead and take a look at one more thing. I'm going to go ahead and go to settings down here and go down to devices. And if you notice, I have a custom device here called my device, and I'm going to edit this. Now this is using the same width and height as an iPhone 6, 7, and 8, but what I've done is actually reduce the device pixel ratio down to 1. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and on the top right here I'm going to go ahead and choose my device. Let's close out of this. Let's refresh the page, make sure it's my device. Let's look at the image again, and notice now the image is 330 pixels wide because we're no longer in a Retina display. The browser is using a 360 pixels wide version of the image. It took me more than 10 minutes to explain the technicalities and all the complexities behind the technology and the code, but it took me only 10 seconds to make it happen with Vanjaro. That is enterprise level CMS that is super easy to use. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social networks. Head over to Vanjaro.com and join the conversation. Let us know what you think about Vanjaro.